Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I've got another deck analysis for you. This one's going to be on Raichu Crobat. It's a deck that we've covered on the channel a couple of times before, but obviously the format keeps changing, new sets come in and out of the format, so we want to give you an updated list on what I think is a really competitive non-EX deck at the moment. With all of the big EXs running around, Raichu is a contender that can actually one-shot these EXs, and obviously because it's an EX, you only take one prize on it, so it can really compete with some of these stronger EX decks in the format at the moment. So we're going to jump straight into it. We've got a 4-3 Raichu line. We've chosen the Nuzzle Pikachu. It's relatively sort of a moot point, but the Nuzzle attack can be relatively strong in certain matchups. Things like Toad-Tina where they're trying to lock you. Nuzzle can grab you a turn of trainers if you can paralyze their active Toad, which is really nice. Also, this 60 HP, most of the other Pikachus in the format actually have 50 HP, so it's nice that we have a Pikachu with 60 HP, and the one that's got a half decent attack as well. So yeah, it's relatively sort of not really all that important, but I think this is definitely the best Pikachu to play. And then of course, the star of the show is indeed Raichu, 90 HP, free retreat. We're mainly looking at this first attack, Circle Circuit. We don't actually run any lightning energy in the deck, so we're just going to be using Circle Circuit, which does 20 damage times the number of Pokemon on your bench. So paired with Skfield, we're doing 160 if we have a full bench, and then obviously, as you can see just in the background there, we've got the Bat line, which can push us up to 180, which can one-shot EXs, which is really nice, but with certain amounts of bat drops, and if we can grab a muscle band exactly when we need it, we can actually even one-shot Megas. And obviously Raichu is in itself a non-EX, which means you're only taking one prize, or your opponent's only taking one prize on a knockout. So it makes Raichu a really favourable trade against a lot of EXs, and I think that's why Raichu is probably one of the best non-EX attackers we've had in quite a while. Simply because it's just so efficient. It's a huge chunk of damage just for a DCE. Free retreat, and can knock out EXs if it needs to. So yeah, Raichu is definitely a really good Pokemon. And of course we are pairing him with the Bat line as per. We've got a 3-3-2 Bat line. The Zubat is just the Zubat we have to run, unfortunately. We don't have the free retreat one anymore. The Golbat, again, playing is pretty much just for the Sneaky Bite for that extra 20 damage to push us from 160 up to 180, meaning that we can one-shot these EXs, which is really strong, especially when you're a non-EX attacker. Sweep Across can sometimes be useful if maybe we've hit 160 and our opponent's retreated to the bench. Sweep Across can do 10 to everything. So if we're playing against any EXs that only have 170 HP, we don't need to waste our Sneaky Bite for the turn. We can actually just use Sweep Across and take 2 prizes that way, which can be really nice. And then Crobat, again, just for these 3 damage counters, dropping them onto this makes the Mega trades a lot nicer. Things like Mega Manectric, you have 210 HP. You can use Crobat to push them down to 180, sorry, and then if you've already used Sneaky Bite or have the Muscle Band, that you can one-shot Mega Manectric, which is really nice. And then again, Skill Dive, just like another Surprise Bite, doing an extra 3 damage wherever you want it. So maybe your opponent's retreated to the bench, just to be able to avoid a knockout. Skill Dive is another way of being another out for you to be able to take prizes from your opponent that's sent something to the bench. And obviously we can also Lysandre stall something and still take prizes using Crobat. If we Lysandre stall maybe something with a high retreat cost, we can use then Skill Dive on the bench, and they don't have sort of any maneuverability. They have to find a way to move that active Pokemon as well, which can be really painful. Obviously Skill Dive again is pretty decent against Night March, but we also do have baby Yveltals for Night March. Oblivion Wing is a really good attack against Night Marchers because it one-shots the Joltix because they've only got 30 HP, and one-shots the Pumpkaboos because they've got 60, but they are indeed weak to Dark, meaning that we do one-shot both of the attacking Pokemon in Night March just with Yveltal for 1 energy, and Oblivion Wing lets us set up on our own bench as well. So maybe if our opponent has decided to discard or go down the route of trying to discard all of our double colourless energy, we can still attack using Oblivion Wing and setting up a Raichu on the bench just using darkness energy, which is a nice secondary way of being able to power up a Raichu relatively quickly because you don't need to manually attach 2 energy. You can attach 1 through Oblivion Wing, which is nice. We're also running Jirachi, which is pretty nice for things like Toadina and Vespiquen and Vileplume. Both of these decks pretty much run exclusively special energy, so one Jirachi can really slow them down, sometimes completely wall them if they don't have a way of being able to move the Jirachi around. It can completely wall some decks, because you discard, obviously you're looking at first attack Stardust, discarding a special energy from your opponent's active, and then preventing all effective attacks including damage done to Jirachi. With things like Vespiquen and Vileplume, they only run 4 DCEs, and more often than not they won't run Lysandre either. They'll just run sort of 3 or 4 Sycamore, meaning that you're basically making your Jirachi invulnerable, and they don't run any way of being able to move you around. And they're sort of they are trainer locking themselves, which is going to make their deck more inconsistent as well. Meaning that Stardust can completely wall some decks. It's a little bit easier for Toadina because they do often run Lysandre just because they're more of a stall deck, and they also play Energy Discard or Energy Disruption often a lot more than Vespiquen and Vileplume, meaning that they can get rid of the energy if they need to that you use for Stardust, but it still can really slow them down. It can take them 1 or 2 turns to be able to get rid of this simple 60 HP basic, which can give you 2 or 3 turns just to get more sort of bats on the board, just to do a little bit of extra damage, meaning that Raichu can come in and clean up a little bit later on. We've also got a 1/1 Milotic line using the Feebas from Flashfire, again relatively sort of irrelevant, but this is the one with a colourless attack, so we can use surprise attack if we need to. It's very unlikely that we're going to need to, but at least this one can attack. The one from Primal Clash has a water attack cost, so you can't actually use it because we don't run any water energy. Anyway, we're running Milotic pretty much to be able to grab our DCEs back. Obviously, most decks that run a limited copy of DCEs are sort of giving Milotic a go. Night March is obviously the one that you think of in the first place, but then I've seen some Toadina lists that are trying this as well. Milotic means you basically have a 5th DCE in the deck, and it doesn't have to be in the deck. As long as you've discarded one, you can easily get it back. But it's also really good for grabbing Megaphones against Entei Charizard, a deck that has quickly surged in popularity over the past few weeks. They will sort of fill their board with tools, and it will make it really hard to knock out one of their Pokemon, or maybe they're doing a lot of damage, things like that. You can Megaphone them 1 turn, take a few prizes, do some damage, probably take a prize on an Entei, and then if they sort of build their board up with tools again, you can go for these sparkling ripples to grab the Megaphone again and sort of get rid of all of their tools again. They very rarely run any tool recovery despite running a lot of tools. So that can take off 5 or 6 tools in one go, and means that you have to deal with a lot less of sort of the trolley mechanics that Entei Charizard runs. Obviously they're running 4 Assault Vest more often than not, which reduces our damage by 40 because we're running DCEs. But if they attach 2, they're reducing our damage by 80, which means we have to do 210 damage. So they basically have the HP of a Mega, but they only give up 1 prize. So it's really useful to be able to hit these Megaphones when we need them. Even if we have to discard it early, we can easily get it back with Milotic. That's pretty much one of the main reasons we're running Milotic. It's definitely really useful. But again, as I said, we can grab the DCEs as and when we need them, if we just need 1 more to be able to take that final kill. Definitely really nice. And then finally, as per, we're running 3 Shaymin EX, just to be able to keep the board going. We need to flood our bench, so Shaymin is a perfect card for that, just because every time you bench it, you're probably going to be drawing cards, and you're also increasing the damage of Raichu at the same time. So moving on, I'm just going to go on to the energy just before we get into the trainers. We've got 4 DCE, as I said, again, just pretty standard, and 4 Dark, just so we have outs to be able to use Oblivion Wing and still get the attachment from Oblivion Wing. We can get rid of one early using an Ultra Ball, something like that, and then still have the out to using it later on. So there's enough energy for us to set up a Raichu purely on basic energy, but obviously we've still got the 4 DC if we want to go for a more of a speed approach and be able to outpace our opponent and take more prizes than they're able to keep up with. So onto the trainers, we've got 2 level ball. Of course, Raichu is levelable searchable, which is fantastic. It means that it makes the whole deck so much more consistent. It means you've got like an Ultra Ball for free just for your main attacker, which is really, really nice. And also, obviously, grabs the Golbat as well. Unfortunately, it does not grab the Milotic. That would be really, really good if it did. But I think grabbing the Raichu it justifies the copies in itself, just because it grabs your main attacker for absolutely free, which is really, really nice. We've then got 2 Sacred Ash. You want to be flooding the bench to be able to maximise your damage, so maybe you'll have to discard some of your pieces early on just to be able to get into your Raichus. And if that's the case, you still have Sacred Ash to be able to get your Pokemon back and flood the board again. Also really good pretty much whenever you're playing a Batline, just because that's an extra 50 damage for every Golbat and Crobat you get back, meaning that you can play them a couple of times, happily send one into the active, let it die, and then go for the Sacred Ash and get the pieces back for an extra 50 damage later on in the game. A really, really nice combo. I'm running 2 again just because you need to be maximising your bench with Circle Circuit, and therefore you want to be making sure you always have the Pokemon in your deck to be able to fill your bench and do as much damage as possible. As I said before, Megaphone is pretty much in here just to be able to deal with the Entei Charizard matchup, just because they can sometimes have so much HP. They have the HP of a Mega, but they're only giving up 1 prize, which can be really, really difficult for us to deal with if we have to use DCEs, or we don't have any way of being able to attach some Dark Energy on quickly. With the Megaphone, it means that we can easily get rid of some of these tools and have an easier time of being able to one-shot or even two-shot these Enteis. It's very rare that they can, without doing their second attack, it's very rare that they can one-shot us back. So they either have to use their second attack and take the risk of damaging themselves, or they can use their first attack, protect themselves a little bit more, but they won't be one-shotting us without some prior damage, which means that we can happily take 2 shots against them, especially with Megaphone, because every now and again we will indeed be getting one-shots on them, just as and when we need them. Then got 3 Trainer's Mail, a pretty standard card just to help sort of boost the consistency of the deck. We don't want to be drawing into too many things. We've also got a relatively high trainer count that's pretty useful, pretty insta-play on the whole. Things like Level Ball and Ultra Ball are always insta-play. We haven't got too many supporters, so it's going to be finding a lot of our good items a lot of the time as well. So yeah, the 3 Trainer's Mail are really, really nice to just keep the consistency high. For Ultra Ball, just because we have so many Pokemon, and again, like I say, you want to be flooding the bench as much as possible. The main thing we're going to be going for are Crobats and Golbats, just to be able to do extra damage. But obviously that's also our out to Milotic and indeed Shaymin if we need it early on to discard our hand, or discard 2 cards from our hand, lower our hand size by 2, and then set up for some more cards to be able to keep us going on that first turn. And then again, for VS Seeker, relatively standard in most lists nowadays. Onto the supporters, we've got 1 AZ. AZ is really, really good with Bats and Milotic. Pretty much any deck you're running Bats or Milotic in, you're probably going to see 1 AZ. So when you're running both Bats and Milotic, it's really, really good. It means you can happily pick up the Bats for an extra 50 damage here and there where you need it, or you can reuse Milotic to be able to get one of these really good cards back, like a DCE, or another Megaphone, or even something sort of less useful, like another Batline. If you can't get into your Sacred Ash, you can actually pick up the Bat from the discard and drop it straight away, which is really nice. So being able to use AZ on both of these really powerful Pokemon that have coming into play abilities is really, really strong, and it's definitely a really, really good card within the deck, just because there's so many different ways you can use it. And obviously, again, we've still got Shaymin as well, which means they can pick up Shaymin and drop it down for some more cards as well. So there's loads of targets for AZ all the time. We've got 1 Lysandre. A lot of decks run 2 nowadays, but we only really need 1, simply because Raichu can one-shot pretty much anything that faces it. We don't need to pick and choose our prizes all that much. Obviously, we want 1 just to be able to have the ability to if we want to, but we don't need to. We can one-shot a lot of things that head into the active spot, so it doesn't matter all that much. But obviously the versatility of having 1 is really, really good, so 1 copy is definitely needed. For Sycamore, again, kind of standard in most lists nowadays. There are a couple of decks that don't run 4 Sycamore. But yeah, just discard and draw 7, one of the best supporters, if not the best support we've got in the format. Nowadays, it's certainly the standard format at least. And then 1 Teammates. Teammates is really good if you... Because this deck can get knocked out relatively quickly. Obviously, Raichu only has 90 HP. Teammates gets you your DCE and your Raichu, or your 2 bats that you need, or your Milotic and your bat, or whatever you need for that turn. You are going to be being knocked out, unfortunately, obviously, because Raichu only has 90 HP. But that's completely fine, because you can then Teammates for the 2 cards you need to continue knocking out. And if we're knocking out EXs, they're only taking 1 prize, we're taking 2 prizes, and we're getting sort of boosted consistency because we're getting exactly what we need to chain more knockouts. And it's, again, really, really good with VS Seeker, just because you can, every time you get knocked out, you can do VS Seeker for another one, and get 2 more cards you need. We've got 4 Skfield, simply because, like we say, we need to flood the board. We need 8 Pokemon on the bench as often as possible, just to be able to hit these 160s, pushing our damage up so high, and it means that we don't need all that many sort of bonus damage multipliers to be able to one-shot our opponent's Pokemon. If we don't have, if we only have 7 on the bench, we need Muscle Band and a Golbat, or 2 Golbats, or a Golbat and a Crobat, things like that, to be able to do 180 damage. So we want to have 4 Skfield as often as possible, just to be able to flood the board and make sure we have the most amount of basics we can on the bench, or the most amount of Pokemon we can on the bench, just to be able to make sure Circle Circuit is doing the most damage it possibly can be. We've got 1 Floatstone, simply because Yveltal has a 2 retreat cost. Obviously, we can start with Shaymin, we can start with Feebas. Ideally, the main starter we want is actually Pikachu. Zubat can be okay, because if you're not attacking, you can evolve into Golbat. Obviously, the Golbat and the Crobat both have free retreat. But there are some pretty iffy starter Pokemon that we don't always want. We kind of always want either a Zubat or a Pikachu in the active position. And when we've got other basics, like there's 7 other Pokemon for us to start with, having 1 Floatstone just means it's not all that much of an issue if we don't start with a Pikachu or a Zubat. There are still outs for us to get into the Pikachu or Zubat, and it also means if our opponent takes a knockout and we don't have any bats on the board, we have another free retreater, so we don't need to make our decision immediately. Again, another thing to note, like I said, Raichu also has free retreat, so there is a lot of free retreaters in the deck. So pretty much as soon as your board's set up, you're fine. But while you're on the first couple of turns, you want to make sure you have the Floatstone, just in case you do start with Yveltal and you don't want to, things like that, because otherwise you have to waste a DCE just to be able to move Yveltal out of the active position, which is never really useful, because then you have to waste resources getting Milotic to get the DCE back, things like that. It just makes our lives a whole lot easier if we have 1 Floatstone. And then finally 1 Muscle Band, just pretty much for the numbers game, for Circle Circuit to do 180. We then have a 4th out of doing 180 along with the 3 Golbat, plus the 2 Crobat, so there's a lot of outs for us to be able to do 180 on a turn, meaning that we are going to be hitting knockouts when we need them. It's also another card you can get back with Milotic to be able to also chain knockouts, which is really nice. You don't need all that, you don't need any more, simply because we do have the Milotic, meaning that we basically have another copy, but that's always in the discard as soon as our Raichu that has the Muscle Band attached is knocked out. So it means that we can chain knockouts quite easily, and even if we can't get our hands onto the Muscle Band, we still have the outs to Golbat and Crobat to be able to chain the knockouts as well, which is really, really strong. So yeah, that's the list. It's not super different to some of our old lists, but it is different enough that we felt we needed to do an updated list for it. So I'm going to jump into a battle, and we'll see if I can get a half-decent battle to show off what the deck really does. Okay, so I got far too excited about playing a game with this deck. I haven't even suggested some tech options for you, so before I jump into a game, I'm indeed going to go through some tech options. I've got a little list of them here. So I'm just going to go through them. The first of them is actually running a Raichu Break. Obviously, Raichu Break increases Raichu's HP to 130. It means that it can be a little bit more difficult to knock out. We can't use its attack, Grand Bolt, because we don't run Lightning Energy, but that extra 40 damage can mean Raichu can survive 1 extra turn, meaning that you can sometimes take 4 prizes against 2 EXs just for 1 prize itself. So Raichu Break is definitely a worthy inclusion, but it's just for the health, it's not for Grand Bolt, because like I say, we don't run the energy for it. Next up we have Giovanni. We can play 1 Giovanni Scheme simply because it can help us with the maths. It's another out for us to be able to do 20 damage with 180 damage with Circle Circuit, that extra 20 damage, to be able to get one-shots on EXs. The key thing where it's useful is against Toad matchups, where you can't draw into your bats, or you can't get your hands on Muscle Band, or you can't get your hands on more of these draw item cards to fill your bench. Giovanni's scheme is one of the best ways of being able to deal with to one-shot a Toad whilst they're locking you, which is really nice. Obviously, the Toad player can't one-shot the Raichu player; they have to two-shot you. So again, it's another time where you can perhaps take 4 prizes against 2 Toads if you can knock out a Toad with the Circle Circuit using Giovanni's scheme, and then get your hands on a Golbat next turn. You can knock out 2 Toads just with 1 Raichu, which is really, really good for the prize trade. Another thing we can try, rather than the AZ and the Floatstone, we could go for some Super Scoop Ups. Obviously, Super Scoop Ups the more flippy option, but the more reliable, but the more powerful option, because it doesn't waste your supporter or your tool slot, and you can still pick up Milotic and Crobat, and also anything in the active that you don't want. Obviously, it's a little bit more risky because it's obviously a flip card, and sometimes you'll get double tails, and you won't actually be able to pick anything up, and you'll wish you'd played AZ and Floatstone. But sometimes you'll get double heads and still be able to use your supporter for the turn, and you'll wonder why you ever played AZ. It's obviously personal preference. I personally prefer this way of playing, just because the deck isn't a flippy deck at all at the moment. I wouldn't want to add that extra risk in. I don't dislike flippy cards, but I don't like playing them for the sake of playing them. And I think the 1 AZ and the 1 Floatstone is just as good. Also, if you're in a Toad heavy format, the 1 AZ is far superior than the 2 Super Scoop Up, just because you can actually use the AZ. So yeah, I think at the moment AZ is a pretty good play. I personally prefer the AZ and Floatstone way of playing it, but you can indeed run Super Scoop Ups if you want to be able to pick up your dudes and still have the versatility of being able to use a supporter for the turn. Going into some other Pokemon sort of inclusions we can have, if we want to fill the bench a little bit more, we can try and run a Ninetales line in here. Obviously that locks in our Skfield, meaning that we don't have to worry about being able to search for Skfield every time we need it. If we can lock in the Skfield, our opponent has to turn off our abilities and then have the other the other stadium in their hand to be able to get rid of both the stadiums, and then it's then a little bit more difficult for us to be able to replace our own Skfield, but it's quite a difficult setup for them. And obviously we have a turn. If they use Hex to stop our abilities, the ability, I can't remember what it's called on Ninetales. I'm going to kick myself because, what is it? Either way, Ninetales' ability is shut off for our opponent's turn, but also our turn, so we do actually have a turn to be able to find that extra Skfield, and because we're running 4 copies, it means that we're probably, we have a relatively decent chance of being able to find it if we can draw a few cards. So Ninetales can be a nice inclusion just to lock in the Skfield, but I think there's different ways you can play with Raichu. Ninetales was in the build that Joe first profiled on the channel back in September time, I think, when the X and Y format, X and Y on was first announced, and that was one of his favourite decks, so I know he'd definitely recommend at least trying the Ninetales, just because I know he had a lot of fun with that deck back when X and Y on was first announced. If you're looking for a different energy accelerator, you can indeed run a Bronzong line. A lot of Raichu decks run a Bronzong line. I think Yveltal is better in a Night March heavy format, which the UK was until about 2 weeks ago, which because it has such an inherently strong matchup against Night March, being able to one-shot both of the Night Marches is really nice. But in sort of, if Night March is low, I think Bronzong is a perfectly good play. It means you don't waste your attack for the turn. Using Oblivion Wing, you can still attach just using an ability and attack with Circle Circuit in a turn. I think it's down to how much Night March there is in your local metagame. There was a lot of Night March until 1 or 2 weeks ago over here in the UK, so I think Yveltal was the play. But now Night March is sort of going down a little bit. Maybe it's time for Bronzong to resurge and have another day in the light. Both are definitely really viable options, and again, it's just personal preference. Whether you have, if you have a lot of Night March in your local metagame, then Yveltal is far superior, just because it has such an inherently strong Night March matchup anyway. But the bronze online is a lot nicer because you can still use Circle Circuit for your turn and attach extra energy as well. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both. And then finally, a card that I've been putting in pretty much 99% of my decks at the moment is Town Map, just because there's a lot of important one-offs. The Floatstone is important, the Megaphone is important, the Muscle Band is important, the Teammates is important, the Jirachi is important, the one Milotic is important. Town Map means you can get these pieces exactly when you need them. And because you're going to be taking prizes so frequently, you're going to be able to grab a prize with, grab whatever you want with the Raichu once you've taken your prize, and know exactly what you're getting. You're not taking the risk of, I hope I draw a Floatstone here because otherwise my opponent can Lysandre me and I just have no outs, or I hope I draw my Milotic here because I need that extra DCE because I know I'm going down next turn. With Town Map, you know exactly what you're getting. The only way your opponent can deal with that is using something like a Judge, or an Ace Trainer, or a red card. But these are a lot less likely to happen than you risking drawing the exact prize you need and not quite getting it. So over the past few weeks, Town Map has gone sort of skyrocketed in my estimation. It was a deck that I only saw useful in things like Night March, just because they need to be able to take their DCs every turn. But now I think, like me and Joe have just been testing with some of the new Breakpoint cards, and in all 4 of the decks we've played, we've tried Town Map just because it's so useful, knowing exactly what you need to be able to chain knockouts and sort of close the game out as quickly as possible. I think Town Map is probably one of the best inclusions in the list if you can find space for it. Things I suggest, again, if your local metagame isn't really full of Night March, maybe take out a Yveltal. If there's nothing at all to do with Entei in your local metagame, maybe you want to take out the Startling Megaphone. At the moment over in the UK, Entei is a pretty big thing. Night March is going down, but is still a very good deck, and things like Mega Mewtwo Y are starting to do well. So all of these things, especially the Night March and the Entei, have specific cards that we need to be able to get our hands on if we need them. And therefore, I think if you can find the space, a Town Map would be a definitely a really, really good inclusion to this deck, just because it means you can carry on chaining KOs and get exactly what you need when you need it to close out the game and go on further into the rounds. But yeah, now I've not got ahead of myself and missed out the tech options, I am going to jump into a game. Hopefully I can find one against what would seem like a pretty rough matchup, and hopefully we can show how Raichu works under against EXs and things like that. Okay, so it looks like we've got ourselves a battle here against a fighting and psychic deck. I suppose it could be, I think it's Mega Mewtwo Y that is the fighting and psychic one. I could be incorrect. But yeah, we'll see what we're going up against here. Could be something like Lucario Bats as well, I presume. It's probably Lucario Bats actually thinking about it. And we're going to start with the Zubat just because we've got the Golbat in hand. We do also have the Floatstone in hand, but I don't want to show the Jirachi just in case we don't know what we're up against. He's also going first, so that means we may be able to catch an energy off guard. Okay, we're going against a Machamp deck. That's interesting. He's going to go for the Fighting Energy and a Birch. And indeed gets the heads. That's really nice for him. Going to go for the Hooper. It'll be interesting to see what we get here, because if we're playing against a... Oh no, there was no grass type, so it's not Machamp Ariados, so it could just be normal Machamp, which could be interesting. Getting 2 Lucario EX, and I would imagine putting them both on the bench. Yep, indeed putting them both onto the bench. So there's our 6 prizes already, and he's only taking 1 against us, so we could theoretically... there are 6 prizes on the board for us to be able to take already. Obviously we're going to prefer going for the Hooper just because it needs 10 less damage, but we'll see what we have to play with next turn. So I think we're going to go for... We'll go for the level ball just to grab a Pikachu here. See what else is in the deck at the same time. Yveltal could be really good in this matchup because of its fighting resistance and again setting us up really nicely. But obviously Lucario does have the attacks that ignore resistance, and fighting in general is a type that isn't affected by resistance all too much simply because it has so many extra like damage multipliers. We don't do all that much damage anyway. I'm going to bench the Jirachi just because I want to take an extra card with Shaymin. I'm also going to attach the Muscle Band, not the Muscle Band, the Float Stone, just because again I want to take an extra card with Shaymin. And then I'm going to go for the Shaymin itself. We get another Zubat, which is nice, and an Ultra Ball. I could Ultra Ball the Milotic here, but I think I want to hold on to it. Let's drop another Zubat. We're not going to be using the... yeah, maybe I should. Okay, let's go for the... Actually, no, let's hold the Ultra Ball. Let's just pass the turn. If our opponent knocks out our Zubat, that's fair enough, because we can go straight into either our Free Retreater or Pikachu, knowing that we have an Ultra Ball next turn. And if not, we have a Golbat to be able to do an extra 20 damage next turn to our Machamp and not rely on having a full bench as much, because we still need to, a few more Pokemon, including Skfield, just to be able to one-shot this Machamp if we need to. Gonna go for the Machoke. This Machamp could be doing a large amount of damage, but he obviously can't attack. So if we can one-shot this Machamp this turn, it will be really, really strong. If we do this on the Machamp, we're gonna need to fill our bench, or we can get the Muscle Band, or we can get another Golbat. Okay, I think there's outs for us to be able to get the knockout on this Machamp. I think it's the right play. And if not, the Machamp would knock us out anyway, so there's no real harm to it. I'm going to Ultra Ball the Sycamore and the Milotic, just because we have the VS Seeker. I suppose it didn't really matter. But the thing to note is I'm holding onto the Dark, just because I'm going to grab a Yveltal and throw it on the bench, and indeed put the Dark on. And then go for the VS Seeker, grabbing that Sycamore back, and grabbing another 7 cards. Okay, we get the Ultra Ball, which is nice. I'm going to go for the Trainer's Mail first, simply because we want to see if we can get the Skfield. Unfortunately, we get a Sycamore, which is okay. Could be worse. So our opponent's attack does 20 damage times the number of counters, and then it becomes confused. It's doing an extra 20. If we use Yveltal, it won't actually knock us out, but I still think I might go for the Raichu play here. I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll see what we've got. I'll discard one of the Shaymins. The Crobat could be useful actually, so let's 20, 100. So let's discard let's discard the AZ here, just because all of those Pokemon could be useful at a later date. And indeed grabbing the Raichu. Now this Raichu is going to go down here, but we're then going to free the spot up for another Shaymin or the Pikachu, depending on what we want to do. Retreat into the Raichu, and indeed Circle Circuit for 100 damage. Meaning that even with an energy next turn, we can actually just... Well, pretty much either way we can knock out this Machamp next turn, because we can either Crobat the active and then use Oblivion Wing, or if we decide to go a different route about it, we can perhaps attach an energy to the Crobat and use Surprise Bite as well. Either way, we knew this Raichu was going to be going down, so that's okay. I'm going to throw the Jirachi up just because it's got free retreat. There's no real reason not to here. Megaphone is kind of irrelevant because we're not going to be using it anyway. I'm going to go for the Crobat on the active Machamp, and could either go for the Shaymin or the Pikachu here. Going for the Shaymin will give us more outs, so let's go for the Megaphone just to get one more card. Like I said, it's not all that important, but it's going to get us one more card with the Shaymin, so that's a good play. And then unfortunately we get a pretty rough hand, but we did discard the AZ, so we can VS Seeker the AZ, which I think is probably the best play we've got here. So let's grab the AZ, just because I don't want to discard a DC and a Pikachu if possible. Let's attach the Muscle Band to... No, I'm going to hold on to the Muscle Band actually, and go for the AZ on a Shaymin. We haven't attached an Energy. I'm actually going to go for the Pikachu here and attach the DCE, though I don't believe there's any Darks in the discard. Let me just double check. There aren't, so let's just grab, put the DCE on there. I'm not going to attach the Muscle Band just in case he does have a way of knocking out that Pikachu, which he certainly could. So rather than put all of the eggs into one basket, let's hold onto the Muscle Band and wait until we know we can get the knockout with the next turn, or we can do an extra little bit of damage with the next turn. And we're going to indeed grab 2 prizes. Getting a DC and a Skfield, that's really good, because that means we can drop our hand pretty low next turn, and still get a few more cards with Shaymin, and potentially do a lot of damage with Pikachu, which is going to be good. So we can either go for 50 with the Yveltal. I think the Skfield does a certain play, so let's put the Skfield down. We could attach Retreat to the Yveltal, but that would risk us missing the damage with Pikachu. Let's put the Muscle Band on Pikachu, because I think I'm going to be dropping the Shaymin this turn anyway. So our Pikachu is going to be doing, our Raichu, sorry, is going to be doing 100 damage if we can get our hands on one. We can do we'll do 120 with the Muscle Band, 140 with Crobat, 160 with Shaymin. So it's looking like we might be able to get a knockout here. I may have to waste the DCE doing it, but that's what Milotic's in the deck for, to be able to be a little bit more sort of lenient with your DCEs. You don't always need to use them. I think it's kind of risky, but I think that's probably still a relatively good play. And then let's drop the Shaymin down for 3 cards. We get a Golbat and a Crobat. It's going to kind of hurt getting rid of the Crobat, but this way we're still getting a half decent amount of damage. We're doing 120 at the moment, 140 with the Muscle Band, 160 with the Golbat, so we just need one more basic and a Raichu off of this Sycamore, so hopefully we can secure ourselves a knockout here. Obviously 20 onto the Lucario, and then just go for the Sycamore. Discarding 2 EVS Seekers is kind of rough, but we do indeed get 2 basics and a Raichu, which is perfect. And we get the Feebas as well, which is really good. Again, we're not too bothered if our Skfield gets discarded, because we can happily discard the Shaymins, and even the Jirachi. I haven't seen any specials yet, and I think we're relatively far ahead in the prize trade that we can be able to do that, and not have too much of a worry. Let's go for the Trainer's Mail, and I think I'm going to grab the Sacred Ash, just to be able to get that Milotic back into play. Though I'm not going to play it until next turn, because we can teammates for it next turn if we need to. We can go for the Sacred Ash and the teammates. And then we're going to Circle Circuit to do 180, 160 I believe, but that's enough to knock out the Lucario, taking another 2 prizes. So as you can see, this is how quickly Raichu can sort of get set up. It's an incredibly fast deck. It's doing huge damage from sort of turn 2, turn 3. And we're against an EX deck that has weakness on us, and we're still sort of ahead in the prize trade. So like I say, we're going to discard Shaymin and Shaymin. We do have another Skfield if we need it, and another 2 basics. So all we need is a 3rd basic if he doesn't manage to knock us out, but he is going to. So here we can go back into the Yveltal. Or we could go into the Crobat. I'm not sure which would be best here. Let's go into the Jirachi just because it's got free retreat for now. We get the Pikachu, which is really nice. The question is, should I hold the Skfield and wait for the turn to set it up next turn? I think that's probably a good play. Let's go for... so next turn we want to ensure that we have the knockout. So let's go for Sacred Ash, getting some Pokemon back into the deck. Milotic is the main priority, but Raichu, Pikachu, Crobat, and do we have enough bench Pokemon? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It could be useful for us to get another basic Pokemon. So let's just go for another Pikachu, sorry. And then we're going to go for a Teammates to grab ourselves a Raichu for next turn, and probably a Lysandre just to make sure we have a knockout. And then I'm just going to go for pretty much any attack, anything here is fine. Maybe I should go for an extra energy. Let's get the Milotic and the Raichu, because this way we can use the Milotic for a DCE. And yeah, I think that's correct. So let's grab those two. Let's bench Pikachu. Grab the DC, attach the DCE. Now, if our opponent has a Lysandre here, he's going to be able to take out this Pikachu, which is a bit of a worry, but we can go for Yveltal and start doing a little bit of damage anyway. Let me see what's in the discard. Okay, so we're probably going to need a DCE back next turn. And then we're going to go for Oblivion Wing, doing 30 damage, meaning that we don't need any other sort of bonus damage things to be able to one-shot if we can fill the bench, which we indeed have the Pokemon for. Oh no, we don't. We need one more Pokemon. But we can get one more Pokemon with Milotic. So hopefully he doesn't have the Lysandre as well, which is really important, meaning that we don't lose Pikachu here. Meaning that I think we're in a pretty good spot at the moment. Depending on what we draw, obviously we need a couple of things still, but we should be okay. Even if we don't get the knockout next turn, we're so far ahead in the prize trade, I feel it's okay if we don't get it next turn anyway. But yeah, this deck is really fun. It can, like I say, it can do so much damage so quickly. You can see it's probably been one of our shorter deck analysis videos simply because of how quickly this deck can function. It's so fast. And he indeed does 100 damage. Not quite knocking us out, but... oh yeah, it does. Sorry, it does knock us out. I thought that was 100. So it knocks us out. We can grab the... we'll put the Pikachu up. So we need to do 150. At the moment we're doing 80. We can put the Skfield into play. And this does 100, 120. We can put the Raichu, and then we can indeed... so we're doing 120 at the moment. Then we can go for... let me just double check. I'm relatively sure I put it back in with... Yep. So we can go for the Ultra Ball, discarding these two cards to grab ourselves a Crobat to do the extra 30 damage on the Lucario, meaning that we hit exactly 180, hit exactly 120, sorry, meaning that he has exactly 180 damage on him for our final two prizes. So, as you can see, Raichu just won against the deck it had weakness on, or it was weak to, that used the X's that had really strong, a really strong sort of game plan from the start. It's a really strong deck, and it's definitely one I recommend you try out. It's one of the best decks we've got in the format at the moment. As you can see, I haven't been playing much this season. But yeah, definitely check out Raichu Crobat. It's such a strong deck. It's so efficient, and it's a deck that can really sort of take these EX decks and give them a run for their money, because it's only trading one prize each turn, and it's so easy to set up with just a DCE, and it's got so many outs, it's so much damage. There's just so much good about this deck. It's a really, really good deck, and I definitely recommend you try it. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke. If there's any suggestions or things you want to talk about regarding the deck, and maybe our card choices, if there's anything that you perhaps disagree with or want to know why we picked it, just give us a comment down below. We like talking to you guys, like seeing what you guys have to say about our decks, and if you say this is the wrong Feebas, things like that. We want to hear all of your opinions, guys, so make sure you let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jared from Omnipoke, and I will see you in another video.